Hi everyone, I hope you're all holding up okay. Welcome to episode 18 of Dissemination Day. We're going to continue our series focusing in much more detail on the area of telehealth, as it seems particularly appropriate given the current context that we're all living in. So the paper we're looking at today was published in 2018. It's by Pennefather and his colleagues. And the name of the article is An Evaluation of an Online Training Programme to Improve Family Routines, Parental Wellbeing and the Behaviour of Children with Autism. And this is published in Research in Autism Spectrum Disorders. So this particular paper was built around the context of challenging behaviour and the impact that parental stress can have on being able to implement effective strategies for children with autism. So the understanding that children with autism may be more likely to engage in behaviours that parents may find challenging, and the stress that these behaviours may cause, particularly over a sort of prolonged period of time, undermining the parent's ability to participate fully in any kind of intervention and the implementation of strategies that have been designed for that, and therefore sort of leading to potentially less positive outcomes for the family as a whole, including obviously the child with autism. So it's focused really on the importance that there is of parents, of families, being able to access the right evidence-based support approaches to enable them to meet their child's needs and address that challenging behaviour effectively. And again, the authors talk about the fact that a lot of this behavioural therapy is very intensive. It quite often will carry out on a one-to-one basis within the home or within a clinic. This can be potentially expensive, can be very difficult for the families to obtain. There can sometimes be problems related to distance that families need to travel, and there might be long waiting lists to access some of that treatment. So it can be a really lonely and difficult place sometimes for families to be in. The authors also talk about the fact that a lot of these sort of behavioural therapies, these sort of training packages that might be out there for parents, have a really high dropout rate. Between sort of 40 and 60% is the percentage that's quoted within the paper. And they talk about the fact that sometimes some of these behavioural concepts can be quite difficult to apply and maintain within the natural setting. So parents are trained in very specific behavioural interventions, maybe within the clinic or with the sort of therapist there, and find it difficult to sort of generalise that sort of behavioural teaching within more natural circumstances. And there are, of course, a whole range of other demands that parents have to deal with as well. These programmes can also be very long, many weeks, and they can therefore be quite impractical for parents to continue to participate in. And therapy of this nature may actually sometimes increase stress for the parents. So it's important, the researchers talk about the fact that it's important to build the parents' capacity to support within the context of daily life. So building in sort of behavioural strategies within the daily routines that are going on within the home. So that really highlights the need for a contextualised intervention that focuses on function-based strategies within routine, and focusing as well, really importantly, on some of the quality of life sort of factors also. So it's based on this background that the authors recognise and cite the need for what they describe as adjunctive supports alongside those sort of behavioural therapies for the children. So they talk about these sometimes might be taking the form of support groups or counselling sessions for parents. Sometimes it might incorporate psychological therapies such as cognitive behavioural therapy, but more specifically within their own training package that they produce, are focusing on some of the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy, which is abbreviated as ACT. And this basically supports the families, the parents, to focus a little bit on their own thoughts and feelings and how they might impact on their actions when supporting their children. And they also, sort of within this paper, focus in on using the telehealth approach to providing that as a flexible alternative, a really effective mechanism for sharing potential good practice and support, and also a flexible approach that can be used to enable parents to access the support that they need. So the researchers wanted to answer the question, is a telehealth model that brings parents and parent educators together via social media and video chat software a feasible, usable and socially valid method of delivering effective instruction and support to parents on topics of child behaviour, building family routines and stress reduction? So a number of different sort of elements included in that study question. And they had 4 hypotheses within this research. First of all, that there'll be changes in pre to post measures of child behaviours. So we'd see an improvement in that child's behaviour from the start of the training process until the end. That there'd be a decrease in parent stress over that time as well. That there'd be an increase in knowledge from the parents around ABA practices. And that there'd be a high level of consumer satisfaction and usability. So the study took place in the States, and they used a repeated measures design, so looking at a pre and post measures on a number of different variables. The intervention period was 3 weeks, so it was a 3-week training package. 23 parents began the process, so that's 21 mothers and 2 fathers, all of whom had children with autism aged between 4 and 8. And some of the measures that they looked at, so the pre and post measures, so these were the measures that they carried out before the training package, but also at the end of that time. First of all, they looked at a strengths and difficulties questionnaire parent report, which focused in on some of the specific behaviours that children may engage in and whether they improved over the period of time that they were partaking in the training. They also took 2 different ratings in relation to stress, a parental stress scale and a daily coping inventory. So that was to assess whether the parent stress levels went down during the course of the training, and also a parental knowledge test that was tailored around the specifics that were covered within the training, just to capture whether the parents' knowledge around some of the behavioural principles increased from the start to the end of the training process. And the other measure that they carried out simply just at the end of the training was a social validity questionnaire to assess whether parents actually felt that the training had been a positive experience and had made a positive difference to their lives and the way that they support their children. So the particular intervention, so the training package, it was a weekly 90-minute online session. And again, this took place once a week for 3 weeks. So a relatively short training package, really. Within each of those sessions, there were only a few parents, so 2 to 4 parents per group. And these took place around the parent, from a practical point of view, around the parents of the commitments at evenings and weekends. They were delivered by a qualified and experienced parent educator who had a range of experience within the field of applied behaviour analysis and also in supporting children with autism. It included direct instruction, group discussion and video and audio sort of information that was there to model some of the strategies. So there were a range of different teaching methods incorporated during these sessions. And parents were then given homework assignments and encouraged to interact with each other over a community page. So they were really prompted and encouraged to engage in some of that peer networking and support, which was a really, really important part of the training approach. So the content within the sessions that was covered, first of all, sort of introductions to the parents, their families, to their experiences with their children with autism, a review of the agenda and the goal of the training package, some focus around the concept of behavioural function and the fact that every behaviour serves a purpose for the individual, focusing on an understanding of the 3-term contingency, so antecedent behaviour consequence, and the impact that all of those things will have on behaviour going forward. So a real understanding around some of the core behavioural principles that are sort of underpinning everything that's going on for that individual. Some focus on supporting parents with data collection, making sure that they're collecting the right data and are able to sort of use that effectively. And then also really importantly, some areas covered around stress reduction and mediation practice. And all of this was based, as I said earlier, on the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy. So that was the content of the sessions over the 3 weeks. So moving on to look at some of the results. And I've popped these into sort of graph format just to make them a bit clearer to sort of go through. So first of all, this first graph is looking at some of the results in relation to the children and in relation to the child behaviour. So the measures were looking at emotional problems, conduct problems, hyperactivity, peer problems, and pro-social behaviour. And there were differences in all of those areas, two of which were sort of deemed as being significant results. And that was a decrease in child hyperactivity from pre to post measure, and also an increase in pro-social behaviour from pre to post measure. So these were both significant results. So that means that after the training process, children were engaging in less hyperactive behaviour and more pro-social behaviour. And then looking at some of the parent results, parental stress decreased using both of the measures, but only one of those was a significant result. And parental knowledge significantly increased from pre to post measure. So some really encouraging results there in quite a small sample size, quite a small study, a pilot study really. So quite encouraging results from just a 3-session training course that was implemented. And also really importantly as well, looking at the quality of the training and the social validity measure that was carried out at the end of the training. Parents rated the overall quality of the training a mean of 5.77 out of a possible 6. So that's a really quite high rating for that training. Also, all of the parents fed back that they would recommend the training to others. So again, that's a really positive result for that training package. So there's some really encouraging results there for the impact of that small training package on child behaviour and also on parental stress levels. So that the authors talk about the fact that within their discussion that this provides some evidence that the blending of 2 evidence-based practices within a training package may be beneficial. So what they're talking about there are the behavioural principles within applied behaviour analysis being combined with some of the parental stress support using the principles of acceptance and commitment therapy, and how actually the blending of those 2 practices did have a really positive impact for those particular parents. It's a method that can be delivered online in a really efficient manner as well. So in terms of face-to-face behavioural input was relatively small, but having that peer support available to the parents and also having that ongoing sort of practice that was being coached through those sort of homework exercises was a really sort of efficient manner of delivering some of that learning around ABA and around ACT. And the content was focused on the principles of applied behaviour analysis rather than specific tailored interventions. And the authors talk about the fact that this actually was really beneficial for the parents. It allowed parents to adapt their practices potentially over time, to have sort of an underpinning knowledge of those principles and procedures. It empowered the parents to be problem solvers going forward, equipping them more effectively to sort of maintain potentially that impact that the practices they were carrying out were working for that child. And maybe potentially why that training was viewed so positively by the parents, because they felt that they were being equipped as opposed to just being trained in very specific interventions that maybe don't generalise as effectively. The authors also talk about the fact that using small groups rather than having one-to-one intervention might have been another reason why this was so positively viewed. My parents sort of did so well with this because they had access to that really important peer support. And also, really importantly, it lowered the cost of the training for the parents because it was able to be spread between the participants. The authors also talk about some limitations in relation to the study. First of all, the really obvious one being it's a really small study. There are really small numbers of participants. And the participant numbers from pre to post, there was a 30% dropout as well, which is lower than some of the statistics that were mentioned earlier on in the article. It was quite a low dropout rate, but there were still only 16 parents that were able to give pre and post measures, so a small number of participants. And that was due to the nature of the study. It's a small pilot study. It's really sort of to just direct research in a sense, as opposed to actually, make huge changes. There was no control group as well within the study, so they talked about the need in future to replicate a study of a similar nature with a much larger group of participants and incorporating a control, so a group of parents who didn't have access to the same sort of training package, and comparing those pre and post measures to both groups using a sort of randomised control trial approach to that. And they also talked about the fact that while it was, that they really highlighted the importance of that combination of applied behaviour analysis and ACT principles and approaches, it did of course make it difficult to tease out exactly which of those was having the positive impact for the parents. So where does that impact stem from? Is it the applied behaviour analytic principles? Is it the sort of stress reduction associated with some of those ACT principles? Or could it just be some of the peer support was really effective at helping the parents to reduce their stress and therefore support their children more effectively? And there was no measure also of maintenance of some of those changes. So they did a pre and post measure, but it would have been really interesting to see whether some of those changes in child behaviour and also in stress reduction had maintained over a longer period of time. So that would have been a really useful sort of bit of data to have been captured. And I think in terms of studies going forward, that would be a useful thing to look at. So really in terms of sort of my thoughts around this study, I think it's a really encouraging little study, and it really does demonstrate some of the positive impact that telehealth can have. How it actually overcomes a lot of those impracticalities in relation to sort of behavioural therapy. And certainly sort of from PBS UK, I think it's a really interesting one to sort of look at. We're having to do a lot of our support now over Zoom, over the telephone, and the fact that actually we can still have really a positive impact through that sort of medium, I think is really encouraging. I like the focus on parent wellbeing. I think it's something that can potentially sometimes be overlooked alongside those behavioural strategies, and the fact that parents were equipped with some of the basics really that they could then sort of take forward, enabling them to feel empowered. It links in really positively with a piece of work that my colleagues Paddy and Tira are involved with currently, with the PBS cooperative. They're in the process of rolling out a training package that takes place in a very similar way to the training package within this study. It's a remote course that's been designed again to empower and support parent wellbeing. This course is a 6-week course, and the sessions are taking place with around about 3 to 5 people within them. So I think it links in really closely and with that particular training package that their PBS cooperative are rolling out. And I think the results from this study are really encouraging in relation to potentially the positive impact that this training could have for families going forward. So I'll shut up now for a bit about telehealth and let you get on with your day. But thanks so much for listening. I hope you found it interesting. Keep your heads up, everybody. We can get through this. We'll be back soon with some more Dissemination Day. Bye, guys.